Welcome into the Hot Read podcast live on a Friday, November the 1st. And Stoney, right as the countdown hit like 1 minute, my ring light here seemingly has
Oh
gone
no.
off and will not turn back on. But hey, guess what? The show rolls on anyways as I try to fiddle with this. I am your host, JT Ruhnke, reporter and writer here at Broadway Sports Media. You can follow me at JT_Ruhnke. And Stoney, you know the deal as I work through this. Editor-in-chief of Sobros Network, 1/3 of football and the other F words, and co-writer over at Stacking the Inbox. How are you doing on a hot read happy hour?
Man, it's been a crazy day. I know a few weeks ago I was recording live from my mother's house. She's actually moving and she's been in that house for as long as I've been alive, so 38 years, almost 40 years. There's a lot of junk in that house that we got to
Oh,
move.
there we go.
And so I've been out there helping her. I've been going back and forth. I've made 3 trips between her house and my house, getting all the junk that's mine out of there over here. And then also trying to maintain responsibilities at the day job, listen to all the press conferences, be up to speed for this show. And I still have a Sobros mailbag to write. I still have a film study to do for Stacking the Inbox. My hair's on fire, JT, but that's okay because that's what we love doing here at the Hot Read podcast and another Hot Read happy hour. So I'm stoked.
Yes. Yeah, yes. Well, thank you for vamping there as I fix my light, and we are
That's what
good to
I'm
go
good
and
at.
roll here on a Friday. Like you said, it is the Hot Read Happy Hour once again, sponsored by our favorite sponsor to have here. Oh, and it goes out again. Oh my goodness.
No.
Sponsored by Sinkers Beverages and Bluegrass Beverages. If you know the 440 network, you know them well. If not, and you're new around here, happy to have you, and we will gladly introduce you to them. Thank you to Sinkers and Bluegrass Beverages for sponsoring the show here. More on them later. And one more note here on the housekeeping. If you are joining us live for what Kenneth here in the comments says, talking some toilet bowl, because spoiler alert, this is a very gross game. Like, this is maybe one of the grossest games we'll ever talk about here on the show. But if you are joining us to talk about this game either on Twitter or Facebook, do us a favor and head on over to the Broadway Sports Media or 440 Sports YouTube channels, where you can join guys like Kenneth and Eddie and Daniel and Zach and all of these lovely people over here in the comment section. Daniel saying, currently blowing the windows and doors off of every car around me, banging this intro music on my way home. It's the perfect music to get you hyped up to talk some Tennessee Titans on a Friday afternoon, in my opinion. Screw what Zach Lyons says, that it's a 5-minute counter. I need my time, especially with my lights going out. I need my time here to get ready. And so we love providing those great tunes for you here. Before we get into some Titans things, I do want to talk about something that happened yesterday. Eddie in the comments says, we got backwards cap Stoney today. Yes, not even just hats and shirts here on the Hot Read podcast, shirts and backwards hats on the podcast.
And it's
today.
a disgusting, dirty hat at that. But literally like walked in the house from moving boxes back and forth and just sat down at the desk, turned the light on, fired up the MacBook, and here we are.
Gotta love it. Speaking of the and as Lewis says in the comments here, I'm here too. J little T. I don't know what that exactly means, but sounds good. Me neither. Well, speaking of the thing I wanted to bring up, that's a good segue, because yesterday I was producing the Paul Kaharski podcast, in which not only did he call me a hobbit, but also the question was brought up that between myself, and former host of the show, Easton Freeze, who would win in a boxing match. And this question got so out of hand that we went into the Titans locker room after his show, when we had our media availability in the locker room, and we started throwing this question around to some of the players, and the answers we got were interesting. And I won't say their names, because obviously this is a very important discussion and they will be held anonymous, but I do have the stats. I'm coming here with the stats on who would win a boxing match between me and Easton. We had 3 players, 1 cornerback and 2 running backs, abstain. They were approached with this question and they abstained from answering, saying that me and Easton look too alike. So I guess that is one. We had a defensive tackle just right out of the gate point to me and say I had the grit here. And so that's 1 point to me. And then after Easton began to lose this battle, he started trying to plead his case to another defensive tackle, in which he then got maybe a pity vote from him. But Stoney, do you have a take on this? This has been a big thing around the Titans media world in the past 24 hours.
See, here's the thing, JT. I like the way Easton's built for a boxing match. I think he's got the shoulders for it. And I think, he's kind of built like he could get in a fight. He could get in a scrap. I don't know if he can, but I'm saying he's physically built like it. I'm with the anonymous player that said, you've got the grit for it. Like, I don't think people realize you strike me as like, you're going to go down into the sewers. If this thing devolves into a knife fight in a mud pit, I'm going JT. The thing that I think people are underrating here is Easton's unwillingness to back away from a fight. And you see it on his shows. You see it when he like really believes he's right about something. He just will not stop.
And he does believe he's right about a lot of things too.
Yeah.
So,
and it's
a lot of the time.
So funny when like we're sitting at Memo's Mexican Kitchen and Zach Lyons is the exact same way. And when they both think they're right about something and you and I are sitting at the table just listening to it back and forth, I think he's got that unwillingness to quit in him. So if he decides I'm not going to lose this boxing match, I think that's the thing that we're discounting here, is that Easton is pretty steadfast in his ways. So if I'm gonna pick just based off of the acumen alone, I think I'm gonna pick JT. But I think Easton's path to victory here would be if he gets it in his mind, in his heart, I have to win. I can't give this up. And he just doesn't quit. I think that's the only way he beats you. But I think if I had to choose gun to my head, I think I'm going with JT in that matchup.
That's a smart thing to say, considering it's now my show and Easton's gone. That's enough of Easton talk here. Maybe we'll continue to get. I think you're right. I think it'd be pretty close. Obviously, he has a wife and 3-month-old to live for.
That's true.
I do not have a wife.
I don't know. That might make you more dangerous.
Maybe. I don't know. But maybe we'll have to continue to get this week by week with more players and see if we can get a good sample size here. Jason says, my take, it would quickly devolve into 2 guys throwing haymakers for 15 seconds until they're both gassed. Maybe that might be the real thing here, but we can actually talk about some Titans. Well, enough of the chit chat as people start to roll in here, because we've already spent 8 minutes on this silly little thing here. And this is a really gross game, but I do think that when you look at the recent events of today's injury report, it could get even grosser, because in Ed's words, he says, in the immortal words of my ancestor Patrick, give me Levis or give me death. And so that's a great segue into talking about this injury report here, where Will Levis is once again questionable to go this week with that right shoulder injury. He was limited all 3 days this week, but he wasn't the only one who was questionable this week. Stoney, first of all, let's get a couple of these other guys out of the way here. Let's talk about the guys who are actually out this week. Tyjae Spears, once again, will miss this weekend. L'Jarius Sneed misses yet another game, which is a really big blow for the Titans secondary. And then, of course, Andrew Rupcich, who we found out earlier this week is pretty much done for the season, as I believe it was a hamstring or some kind of lower body injury, I think. No, sorry, tricep. It's a tricep injury. I could just read the paper and it would give me the answer. But he is done and most likely out for the rest of the season here. And then you get to the 7 questionable Titans players this weekend, and it's not like they're just some bottom of the barrel, bottom feeder roster guys. These are some big deals here. Talking about the guys who are questionable and did not practice whatsoever this week, at least on Friday. Trey Avery, T'Vondre Sweat, Tyler Boyd, and Tony Pollard.
Oh
Big
boy.
time guys. You look at the
Oh
guys like
man.
Tony Pollard and Tyler Boyd, who did not practice at all this week with a foot and shoulder injury, respectively. And that's, I guess, where we can start with this game and how it gets even grosser. You know, obviously the quarterback situation we'll discuss in length here, but Stoney, I don't know how to feel if we get to Sunday and the Titans are going to be rolling out Julius Chestnut and Joshua Kelly as their only available running backs. Maybe even a Jabari Small elevation.
Yeah, man, I think I would kind of hope for the Jabari Small elevation, because it feels like there's just no spark in that remaining running back group. It's a bunch of like tough runners that aren't particularly elusive. And that's the dynamic that you lose with Tony Pollard and Tyjae Spears both being out for this. Pollard is also in my opinion, their best player on offense right now. So that would be a massive blow if he weren't able to go. But even if he is able to go, it sounds like the foot injury might be keeping him from 100%. And I'm going to go out on a limb here, JT, and say a foot injury for a running back, probably not ideal, probably not something that's easy to work through. So I think it could be, when you think about this particular matchup and how their path to beating the Patriots looks, I think it's a heavy dose of the run game. And if you don't have your top two backs, I think it greatly hinders your ability to run the ball effectively, to go out there and just run your offense the way that you want to. So I think this could be probably the most crucial injury report issue to watch is Tony Pollard and whether he's in or out in that game, because I think he's absolutely critical to them beating the Patriots.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about regardless of who the quarterback is, spoiler,
Yeah.
that is not set in stone for the Titans this week. It could be Mason Rudolph. It could be Will Levis. But either way, the one constant in this offense has been the ability to rely on Tony Pollard and the run offense here for the Titans. And if you don't have Tony Pollard, you really don't got anything, because really, if you go into this game, if you go into this game with Tyler Boyd and Tony Pollard out, your top skill position players would be what you would have to say Calvin Ridley, NWI, and Shigakonkwo, probably Josh Wiley.
I mean,
those are the four guys you have to rely on.
Listen, maybe we get a little more Jaquan Jackson in the backfield. I know they tried the end around to him last week, but I mean, hell, just to get some kind of spark, some kind of lightning rod in the backfield, maybe they get a little creative there and we get more Jaquan Jackson or Calvin Ridley out of the backfield. They're going to have to do something creatively to kind of get that running game sparked.
Yeah, and then you also talk about, as Zach Riley points out here in the chat, NWI Legacy game may be loading for the former UDFA
like
here. Couple
Throw
other
them
injuries.
corner fades, baby.
Yeah, a couple other injuries that, because we're still not done with it here. Amani Hooker is also questionable, but was a limited participation on Friday's practice. And then, of course, the New England Patriots also have, let me see, how many is this? 8 guys who are questionable. Mostly a lot of rotational players, but the biggest one, just like the Titans quarterback, controversy, conundrum, who will actually get the start. The Patriots also have one of their own, in which Drake May, after suffering a concussion last week, is questionable to play in this game. The Titans also don't know who they will be facing in Jacoby Brissett and Drake May. So let's discuss these quarterback questions going into this game that I think Stokely here in the comments describes perfectly. He calls it a Dutch oven bowl Sunday. Just shut the windows, crank the heat up, and let that stank marinate. I think that's a perfect way to describe it. But I think the biggest question out of all of these is, will Levis return this weekend? And I think that's the biggest one. You kind of you see what this team has really talked about this week, emphasizing a couple different ways that they've changed their approach to getting Will Levis back. And it is to get him back, because I think as much as we want to talk about the people who think this may have been a quiet benching, this is a real injury related thing that I think now after 2 weeks of Mason Rudolph, you get the idea that there never was a better option. So Will Levis must be the quarterback when he is healthy, and he will be. But he does, start to have a little bit more patient this week, and it becomes more of a question than an answer that we know earlier in the week. And so here's what Will Levis had to say about his shoulder injury and how he's been, progressing through the week.
I feel good. It's been a long process, but we'll see for Sunday. It's been, frustrating, but I feel like we're finally starting to get to a point where I'm
feel more likely than not likely you'll be able to go Sunday?
I don't know. To be determined. We'll see.
I know the big thing was throwing in back-to-back days. You got to do that. How has that been for you?
Yeah, good. That's part of the process, is dealing with the recovery and the fatigue and that. So it's good to get out there and throw it around a little bit today.
Right. And so, continues to say TBD, but, you have, I guess, signs in the right direction here with Will Levis getting back to the field here. And then you kind of talk about, with Will Levis still kind of trying to navigate this injury, how much stress and confidence does that give you in a guy like Mason Rudolph, who, like last week, with all of the starter reps, kind of went out against the Detroit Lions, and even though they lost by 38, this was a Titans team that was able to kind of dice up a Detroit Lions defense that is, pretty stout. And so I wonder, Stoney, and I guess the question is, how confident, even if Will Levis and Mason Rudolph are sharing kind of the 50-50 starter reps during practice this week, how confident are you in a guy like Mason Rudolph to kind of go out there and execute like he did last week?
Yeah, I think it should be an easier matchup against a worse defensive front than they faced last week. So I would think what we're seeing with Mason Rudolph, to me, is kind of acclimating to meaningful in-game action. I think he's gotten better the longer he's been out there. You got to cut back on the turnovers. Obviously, the interceptions are unforgivable. I get it. No issue with that. But for the most part, with a larger sample size, it seems like the more recent efforts have been better. So I do think he's at a point where it feels like he's kind of operating the offense a little bit better than Levis. So if that is ultimately the choice, I think he probably does still give the Titans the better chance to actually win the game, because he's not necessarily coming in cold.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you here. And the one other thing I wanted to talk about with the quarterback position here, and I think this is an interesting conversation that Ed Henry here in the comments nails right on the head. He goes, looking back, isn't it obvious that Levis lied to the staff about his shoulder, or they knew and tailored the game plan around it? You kind of look context clues over the last 2 days. Will Levis yesterday in another clip said it's ultimately his decision on how good his shoulder feels, and that it's on him to communicate clearly to this coaching staff about where that shoulder is in terms of its recovery. And that certainly was choice wording that I feel makes me feel like, okay, so maybe that wasn't the case the entire time. And then you look at what Nick Holtz said yesterday about how, this week trying to ramp Will Levis back up into full starter reps, they've kind of pushed him more, but then also maybe overshared a little bit how this entire staff and Levis have taken maybe a different approach to how bringing Levis back after the Indianapolis game. Let's watch that clip real quick. And I do think it's an interesting answer from Nick Holtz.
Him more, I would say, and we are all doing a better job, medical, coaching, general manager, Rand, everybody, of really making sure we're all on the same page. We're all talking about it. I think, hindsight's 20/20. I think we wish we would have pushed him harder, talked to him more, and that's kind of what it is. But now I think we're all very much on the same page of what we're looking for, what we need to feel, how he needs to feel, and Will sees that too. So I think we're all on the same page.
Hindsight is 2020, and I wish we would have maybe talked to him more. Is certainly seems like it's a staff who took Levis at his word, Levis being one of the ultimate competitors. And maybe Will Levis wasn't exactly as truthful, which, to be fair, I think, as much as people don't want to hear it, maybe gives an excuse and an explanation as to why he didn't look good in that game. But ultimately, it comes back on you when you're not healthy. You're making those dumb throws. You say in the post game that you're not 100%, but you're healthy enough to win, and you're throwing interceptions that actively not make you win the game for your team. It's, I think that's where you start to really get into trouble there. And so it sounds like this staff, from the things we've heard and the context clues that you can put together, it's kind of taken that decision maybe a little bit out of his hands here. And so I think that is for the better. However, still, I do think there's maybe a 50-50 shot between Mason Rudolph and Will Levis. It's still yet unknown. Stoney, if it were to be Will Levis this week, how does your kind of let's say your opinion of how the Titans can execute against this Patriots team change?
Well, I think by and large, it's an execution issue. It is like seeing him go out there and actually execute the offense, because we haven't seen a whole lot of that to this point. And to me, I think that's where we can get into potentially some of the positives of him sitting. I think the optimistic view is that being on the sideline, watching the offense run, watching Mason Rudolph, don't throw your tomatoes at me, efficiently operate the offense. I think he did. I know it wasn't great specifically in the second half, but I think seeing those things you hope maybe some of those things start to sink in with Will Levis, and he comes out and he starts to execute the offense a little bit better. We just can't keep seeing the same mistakes over and over. The locking in on the first read, the hero ball interceptions, the dumb mistakes that are just plainly and squarely his fault. These are things we have to start seeing him grow from. And that's what, I think. I don't necessarily think for the passing game, this is the matchup everybody thinks it's going to be. I know the Patriots have a poor record. They're a team you can run the ball on, but their secondary is still pretty damn good. They're going to force a lot of tight window throws, which is something we haven't necessarily seen Levis execute upon this season as well. So I don't know that I'm buying this as an easy matchup for specifically the passing game to get going. And then you've got a guy that's coming in a little bit cold after missing a few weeks, and he's been struggling with this sort of matchup in the past anyway. I don't know, JT. I might be thinking about leaning Mason Rudolph in this situation to begin with, just to give Levis another week to really get back to 100%. I think, to Ed's question, lying has such a negative connotation to it, and it's such a strong word. I would say maybe he was trying to puff his chest out a little bit, trying to be the big tough football player and work through these injuries, and maybe the coaching staff, like you said, just took him at his word for it. And maybe they've grown from that, and maybe they're doing things differently, but I don't know. This matchup looks easy on paper, but I personally, my opinion, I think getting the win here in this spot is a more important objective, because you're not getting a full evaluation on Levis anyway in this game if he's not 100%. So if that's the case, just go try to win the game and put Mason Rudolph in there, because I think he probably does give the Titans a better chance to win this game. Did that even answer your question? I don't even remember what your question was at this point. I've been talking so long.
No, I very much echo the sentiments of what you said right there, because I think I kind of agree with you. Because when you look at what a Will Levis, who hasn't had all the snaps this week as the starter, does to them, it maybe takes away a little bit of what Mason Rudolph was able to accomplish last week. Not saying that Will Levis
Sure.
could do it, or couldn't do it, but like Mason Rudolph is, operating that offense, like you said, pretty efficiently here. And so I think I ultimately agree with you that you can't really start Will Levis, I think, until he's back to getting 100% of the starter reps, which is not the case this week. Like you said, I think this is a really winnable game. You talk about the pretty decent secondary here against the New England Patriots. Obviously, Christian Gonzalez is a guy that we all were very high on coming out of the draft. Does not, has a season-ending, I believe, knee injury or something of the sort last year, but has come back and looked really good. He definitely is going to be traveling a lot across the field, probably playing on Calvin Ridley for a majority of the game. And so with that, I do think that it would, here's a word, behoove the Titans staff, or the coaching staff here to start Mason Rudolph. And Lewis asked in the comments here, who's the receiver? I do think that if Tyler Boyd doesn't play again, you're going to see an elevation for Mason Kinsey probably again in this game, if nothing else, because Jaquan Jackson becomes your main slot guy, but then there's really no one behind him as well. Mason Kinsey definitely will get an elevation. I do also think it opens the door for another guy to get elevated, whether that's Bryce Oliver or someone else here, maybe another running back like Jabari Small. I think that definitely could be the case. Okay, changing sides here to another quarterback question. What should fans be? Who should fans want this Titans defense to face? And it's either going to be Jacoby Brissett or Drake May this week. Stoney, I would love to hear your answer. I think this one is pretty easy to me.
It's easy for me
who I'd rather want to face this week. And maybe I'm about to say it and you're going to totally disagree, but I think fans should really hope and pray that Jacoby Brissett is the guy that they trot out there this week. You just look at what Drake May has been able to do over his first couple of games here. I think he's brought an absolute jolt to a New England Patriots wide receiver core who you called a bunch of wide receiver threes that are trying to be wide receiver ones, or that was some tweet that I think you've referenced that I also have forgotten who put that out there, but it is true. I mean, Drake May has elevated this offense in his first couple of starts, but I think the big thing of why Jacoby Brissett is the guy you want to face, and I think this is really interesting, and this one caught me off guard yesterday. It's because of the running factor. I think, Jacoby Brissett is an older guy in this league and maybe doesn't possess the same running ability that he could have in his younger years. But Drake May, I don't think people seem to doubt how good of a runner he actually is.
Yeah,
and it
sure.
certainly seems like there were some red flags to me in the locker room yesterday when Arden Key comes out and says in a video that they cannot move in the pocket. And so I went back and found this video because I wasn't able to get a clip of it, but I knew that I was like, Arden definitely said this, and I found it. And here's what he said verbatim. Arden Key on whether they will face the challenge of preparing for two quarterbacks yet again. He says, the good thing is that both quarterbacks are not mobile. We don't have to worry about the zone reads, quarterback runs. They both are not as mobile. Well, Brissett not as mobile as he once was, but is downplaying that. And I think that if it is Drake May out there, you absolutely have to respect him in the run. You look at what he's been able to do in his first 4 games as a runner. In his first game, 2 carries for 12 yards. His second game, 5 carries for 38 yards. Third game, 3 carries for 18 yards. And then in the most recent game before going out of there, 3 carries for 46 yards. And so hopefully that was an error on Arden Key. But if not, and this Denard Wilson defense is neglecting the idea that if Drake May goes in this game and they are not looking to defend against his ability to move outside the pocket and run and kind of evade pressure like that, that is a huge blind spot to me in this game plan.
That's horrible, JT. I mean, I read that in the show agenda today, and I thought JT has like maybe he's like mislabeled a player. There's no way that they said Drake May can't run. They're not very mobile. It's incredible. Like it makes me worried. What is their tape study like inside the Titans facility that they're not seeing this? Because Drake May, like last week against the New York Jets, several plays that Drake May just tucked the ball and ran and moved the chains. And it's not even anything that you have to like key in on the all 22 to see. You can rewatch the game broadcast and you can see Drake May making plays with his legs. And it's not just tucking the ball and running, but extending the play, but keeping his eyes downfield. This is absolutely a guy that is operating well outside of the pocket and has to be contained in that regard, or else, man, the Titans are going to be in for a rude awakening. Like, this is one of those things, quite honestly, I hear and I'm like, how well prepared is this crew right now? Because that just seems like a huge oversight. Like, you're just not watching the tape or something. If that's what you really think, and this isn't just like, you know, putting stuff out there just to fill a quote, you know, just talking for the sake of talking. Even Jacoby Brissett, no, he's not the most mobile guy. He's not the fastest or the quickest, but he's a pretty shifty runner still at this age. He's really big, really tough to bring down as a runner. And there were plays that he made against the New York Jets last week where, yeah, it might have looked like he was running through quicksand, but left unattended to, in a sense that, well, maybe you don't think he's going to take off and run at all, so you just don't have anybody there to protect the edge. He can take advantage of that, and he can make runs that move the change. So this feels like a pretty egregious slip up by Ruhnke, in my opinion.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. It might be something that, honestly, after the show, it's something that I caught yesterday, and looking back through my notes, kind of realized today as I was prepping for this show, might be something that I go right about after this, either probably for Stacking the Inbox or Broadway Sports Media or something, because that's a big deal. Like,
it is a big deal.
If they cut, like, if the New England Patriots come out this weekend and the Titans simply cannot get or try to get pressure on him, and they evade outside the pocket, and it looks like Jacoby Brissett or Drake May can run on them all day and gets them out of tight spots. Let's say like there are a couple of instances where it's 2nd and long, 3rd and long, and they find time and space to move the chains, and that becomes a big impact. That's got to be the first thing on the list next week, because we talk about how this defense and all these different units have simply, the game plan is apparently there, but they simply are not executing. That feels to me like, okay, maybe it isn't just the players not executing, but that the game plan and the scheme is simply, and what you're doing to prepare for these guys just simply is not going to get it done. And so it's one of the biggest things to watch this weekend in this game is that whoever it is, the defense has to put more attention on being able to stop the quarterback running. All right.
If either of these quarterbacks make several plays running the ball on Sunday, and it's a situation where it catches the defense off guard, I think that would raise, within the context of this quote that we're discussing, I think it would raise serious questions about the coaching.
Yeah, I do think so as well. And that's a perfect segue into talking about another coach on this staff who had a very interesting press conference yesterday in light of recent events, and those events being giving up almost 300 return yards on special teams. We had our first opportunity finally to talk to Colt Anderson after what was, as he called, and rightfully so, called an unacceptable performance and display from Colt Anderson. And so I'm going to share 2 clips here, and then we can kind of get into a discussion about what he said and just kind of talking about where do they go from here. Here's what Colt Anderson had to say. 2 questions, I guess, clips here. The first one is just kind of talking about, what happened and the struggles of this group right now and where to really put the blame. And then the second question here, I asked a follow-up question after, I'm sure if you're listening to this show, you've listened to a lot of other shows where they've talked about Colt saying that it's never been an effort issue for this group, and then calling the Lions game a matter of effort on the special teams unit. That's been beaten into the ground now. But I asked Colt Anderson that this is between the block punts, and we've been seeing shades of other special teams units being able to return on this team in the past couple weeks, and it kind of gets to a boiling point like it did on Sunday. It seems like players have been saying, yes, everything we're doing in practice, like we should be able to execute better, but we don't. And so I asked Colt Anderson, what could be the disconnect here? Here are those two clips.
I mean, I'm in charge of this unit. Special teams is what I got hired to do, is coaching. And so, you know, I'm passionate about it. I feel strong with my ability to coach special teams. And, you know, we need the players to you know, go out and, you know, do what they're supposed to do. And I believe in them, and they believe in me. So we're ready to get on to New England. And we got a great, like you said, we got a great challenge opportunity to go out and, you know, get the season going.
And so he says that, right? And I believe that in that answer, he says they know what to do. We just have to go out there and do it. Yet we hear from guys like Mike Brown after the game last week, where he says that we know what to do, but we're not doing it. And so I asked him what the disconnect could be here. And this is what Colt Anderson had to say towards the end of his press conference, after visibly flustered and just kind of, you know, saying contradicting himself a little bit. Here's what he had to say to that question.
I appreciate the players saying that, but at the end of the day, it's not me. I apologize. After the game, I apologize to the guys. I didn't have them ready. We'll be ready this week.
Do you feel any?
So he says he doesn't have them ready, but they're also they're ready and they know what to do. It's certainly, we talked about last week how it may not be the right decision to, you know, fire Anderson for a jolt on a 1-6 team. But it also doesn't feel like how much confidence after watching that press conference can you really have in the special teams unit, Stoney? Because you know, we've seen them adjust in the past with the punt protection. That's something we saw them kind of adjust and fix. But it feels like this is it's not just an easy fix for this team. You know, punt coverage requires all 11 players on the field to execute properly in terms of, you know, keeping them on their side of the field here. So, you know, what is your confidence level after hearing that press conference and just in general of Colt Anderson right now to fix the problem?
I mean, as far as the problem on the field, I won't have a lot of confidence until I actually see improvement. And to their credit, they picked up Justin Hardy this week. We've heard there's going to be personnel changes on special teams, like they're rotating guys, and they're searching for the right guys that can finally do what they're told. And I don't think Colt Anderson or Brian Callahan are going to come right out and say it, but I think they feel like that's the issue. Now, I will defend Colt Anderson a little bit in saying this does not look like a guy that is used to being in front of the camera, being in front of a microphone, not a lot of experience in a media room, younger coach. You know, this is his first foray into this type of environment where you got to walk into a room full of a bunch of people that don't think you're doing a good job, and they're just going to grill your ass. And he got grilled, and he folded under it. I'm not saying that was a particularly strong press conference performance, but I also think it's a little disingenuous of people to just take this quote about effort and like not even try to remotely glean that this could be a guy that's just kind of nervous, that doesn't quite know what he can and can't say. I took it to mean, hey, effort hasn't been a problem before, but this season, but effort was a problem in this game. That to me, like, I wasn't one of the people that were sitting there saying, oh yes, he literally contradicted himself. Oh my gosh, is it effort or is it not effort? I kind of understood what he was trying to say. It's like it hasn't been a problem with us, but it was a problem in this game. So something's going wrong there. I think it was coach speak for him to go out there and say, oh, well, that's nice of Mike Brown to say we're not doing what we're told, but it's on me. I'm the coach. I'm the one in charge of the unit. Like it's coach speak, guys. I don't think he's contradicting himself. I think he probably really does think these guys need to fucking execute. These guys need to do what they're told, but he can't say that over and over. The issue that I have with Colt Anderson is that you're talking about effort to begin with in front of the entire press corps. And they're going to go and they're going to run with these quotes about something that to me seems like a pretty egregious breach of the locker room trust. Like if you have questions about effort for this team, man, these are prideful guys we're talking about, dudes that put their bodies on the line for this sport. And you just went out there to the entire press and you said effort wasn't good in this game. To me, JT, that's something that you say behind closed doors. You don't say to the public. You just go out there, you bite the bullet, you take your lumps, you talk about what a shitty coach you are, how you're failing, you're not getting it right, and we're working on ways to fix it. The performance we got in that press conference was not strong. It did not radiate strength. And I think that's the problem, but I'm still willing to give him somewhat of a pass because I do think a lot of the media has been twisting his words a little bit to fit a narrative that, I mean, quite frankly, gets clicks because people are mad right now and they're reacting to the mad stuff. And I'm willing to give Colt Anderson a break on that stuff. I'm not willing to give him a break on the fact that the special teams has been consistently poor no matter what personnel they've put out there. And I am critical of him going out into a press conference. And to be honest, maybe he didn't mean to. Maybe it was just a situation where he didn't really know what to say, so he just said what was on his mind. And he hasn't developed that sense of when to kind of finagle the fine line of the message with the media to answer questions without throwing your own guys under the bus. I would be critical of those two things, but I just don't see it as bad as everyone else seems to at this point. And I think these dudes, it's in the back of my head about Nick Holtz too, watching some of these press conferences where I'm like, okay, if he's communicating in the meeting rooms the way he's communicating in these press conferences, brother, we got trouble. And it's the same with Colt Anderson. Like if he's communicating to the team, and I don't think he is, I don't think Nick Holtz is either. From what we know, it's probably a more comfortable environment without the cameras, people, sharks smelling blood in the water, trying to pull a quote to get everybody fired up.
Certain sharks
Yeah.
smell water too.
I think away from that environment, I give them the benefit of the doubt that they probably are clearer communicators. But it is in the back of my head that I'm like, man, if this is what these guys look like in these meeting rooms, we got trouble, brother. But to answer your question quite simply, I'll have confidence in special teams when we see tangible improvement.
Yeah, and that's going to have to come yet again this week. I mean, you don't get it. You don't get a freebie this week against against the New England Patriots with Marcus Jones back there, another guy who we've seen time and time again over the past couple of seasons. I mean, even talk about last year where he runs back. I believe it was last year where he runs back a game-winning punt return against the New York Jets in what was an absolute slop fest, much like this game could be, to win that one. So the proof has to be in the pudding, for a lack of a better phrase there. But I think we can be done with that conversation because it's frankly, it's become pretty tiresome.
We got a dead horse.
Yeah.
We got a dead horse on our hands and we're just kicking the shit out of it.
You know what's not a dead horse that I'll continue to beat? Sinker's Beverages and Bluegrass Beverages, our lovely sponsor of the show. Sinker's Beverages is serving the East Nashville community for over 40 years. They are a 4-time liquor store of the year, best of Nashville from the scene, including this year, which they just won. You got to join their in-crowd program. Sign up with them for special allocations, benefits every other week that you can only know about if you're part of the in-crowd. One of my favorite things about Sinker's Beverages. Also got to give them a follow on social media at SinkersBev on Twitter, sinkers.nashville on Instagram are the two places that you can definitely find them on social media. And then if you can't make it out there, no worries, because they have you covered over on Uber Eats. Simply search Sinkers and they deliver the booze to you. Remember, they drive so you can drink responsibly. Have to give a shout out also to Bluegrass Beverages in Hendersonville, who have been serving the Hendersonville location or community for over 50 years. Thank you to Sinkers and Bluegrass for sponsoring yet another Hot Read happy hour that is for sure to go over once again, not just an hour here, because we're going to talk about the scheme. And Stoney, you came into the show wanting to talk about, there's been a lot of talk with a lot of, me, you, guys like Paul Kaharski, guys like Braden Gull, even guys, former host of this show, Easton Freeze, talking about how backing Brian Callahan and seeing the continual growth and strength of this offensive scheme here. And you wanted to come on the show and say, go maybe a little bit past just the nuance of, hey, this scheme is good, and kind of maybe give people a couple reasons why the scheme has continued to improve and get better.
Yeah, so it was one of those things I just noticed. Like people are mad this week. Obviously, the 1-6 start, you lose by 38 points, and then people like me come on the podcast circle. People are on their radio shows writing about it. Well, the scheme is good. The scheme is good. The scheme is good, and people just push back on that because they don't want to hear it. And part of it is just being mad because the team sucks right now. But I kind of felt like, okay, well, we keep telling people the scheme is good, but I don't think we've really dedicated the time to explain why. And this is something that shows up on the tape, shows up on the All 22. And I thought, man, let me expand on this a little bit, because I did a video for Stacking the Inbox last week, going back to the Bills game and kind of highlighting areas where the scheme, I think itself, is good. But I know like not everybody subscribes to Stacking the Inbox. So I thought, hey, if we've got some time on today's show, I just want to take a couple of moments to talk about why the specific reasons why I see this offense succeeding, ultimately being a successful modern offense in today's NFL. And I think we've seen glimpses of it. This offense is about taking control of the game. Not in the traditional sense of like, we're just going to pound the ball and play defense, but it's a quick, efficient passing game. It's really hard to defend. And if executed properly, like we saw in the first half against the Detroit Lions, they can really chew up clock. And it's built in a way that takes advantage of just about every defense that the opponent can play. So that's a strength to begin with when we're just talking about the vision of what this offense is. But things that we have seen this season, guys getting open, that's another popular talking point about the scheme. Well, guys are getting open. But we're looking at separation metrics. And I think if you go to the next gen stats, you're seeing guys routinely turn in performances that are above league average in receiver separation. This game against Detroit, the league average is separation of 2.97 yards, and Josh Wiley had a score of like 5.67 yards of separation or something like that. Calvin Ridley, for all of the shit that he's taken for his performances so far this season, Calvin Ridley pretty regularly had an above average separation score per next gen stats. And you see it on the tape. You see guys getting open. There's a play that I clipped. It's either on Twitter, it's on Stacking the Inbox somewhere, where Calvin Ridley just effortlessly releases, takes 2 steps, and he buys himself 2 yards of separation on a crossing route, and he's just never even looked at as a part of the progression. So that's a problem. But the separation is there from the receivers. I really like the route concepts in this offense. It is designed to cause conflict in defenders. So you're sending 2 guys to one zone, so to speak. One breaks, one keeps running deep. That puts the safety over the top in conflict, because who is he going to cover? He's got to cover one of them. And there's a situation where if he makes the wrong read, the other receiver is wide open. And I'm trying to explain this in as simple terms as possible without getting into dagger concepts and the versus the cover 2 and all that stuff. Like people don't like that stuff, but I'm trying to simplify it. 2 guys to 1 defender. That defender has to choose, and if he makes the wrong choice, the other receiver is wide open. And we're seeing some of that stuff contribute to that separation metric where you're seeing guys get open. These route concepts are really good, and they're effective, and there are a lot of the best offenses in the NFL that are running this kind of stuff. There was a play in the Detroit game where the tight end hits the flat. I think it's Vanette in the flat, and Rudolph rolls out. He's running to his right. Vanette's open. Here comes the flat defender behind him. And the timing of this play, Wiley comes up behind the flat defender. So suddenly this guy has to decide, am I going to play Vanette or Wiley? And Rudolph can find the open tight end. Like that's stuff getting schemed open. That's causing conflict in defenders. It's hard to read. And on a lot of plays, there's usually a check down, a safety valve, where if nothing is open down the field, if this stuff doesn't develop, there's somebody to dump the ball off to try and do something with. This is a deep playbook. They play out of multiple formations to get to their base offense. It's really cool to watch. Like, I haven't seen too many plays that look exactly the same from the same formation. And that makes it incredibly difficult to defend when defenses don't really know what they're going to do. If they're showing a look that they haven't really shown a lot of before, even if it is kind of getting into their bread and butter runs or their bread and butter passes, it's really hard from the line of scrimmage pre-snap to recognize what the Titans are going to do. And then they work counters off of that. So there was a really good play in this Detroit game where they got down into the red zone where they ran what looked like their traditional bread and butter power run that they've run quite successfully. We've seen a lot of big runs from Tony Pollard down the field out of this play. They pull Dylan Radins. He comes across the formation. He smashes the end block. The running back comes behind him, hits the hole, and he's gone. Right? Well, they do that in this Detroit game down in the red zone, and Detroit plays it perfectly like that's what they're going to do. Except the problem is Radin slips, and I'm not going to beat him up over that because it could have just been a turf issue. Radin slips. He can't get to the block. Suddenly Julius Chestnut is like, uh-oh, this guy's coming free at me. It looks like he freezes a little bit, like he doesn't quite know what to do. And then the play is designed to roll to the backside where Chig has kind of leaked out on the backside, and Mason Rudolph makes that throw, and Chig, it's a little rushed, it's a little off, and Chig ends up either dropping it or he's tackled right away. But you can see the vision where if Radins hits that block, man, Detroit reacts to that. They're thinking this is their power run. Watch Chestnut play, flow to Chestnut, flow to the left side, fill those run gaps, and then boom, on the backside, Chig is wide open, and it's likely a touchdown. So you see those counters. It's just a matter of executing, player execution. The issues with this, it is a timing-based offense. It takes some time for these things to develop down the field. Some of the run concepts take a little bit of time for the right offensive lineman to get to the right spot, to hit the right block. And in those situations, the run game can come down to one block, like that play I just described. That's on it's Radins. Like if Radins makes that block, the play probably works. Detroit reacts to it, and Chig goes for a big gain. But if he doesn't make that block, well, you saw what happened. The whole thing was blown up. So I think there are issues where it's not just that it has to be executed, but some of this stuff has to be executed perfectly. And it's a lot to ask of players that are still learning the system. But the bottom line here with this scheme, better throws, better protection, fewer mistakes. I think this thing's going to cook.
Yeah, and as Kenneth says, whisper quietly, you're getting some of that better protection. As he says, the offensive line has
look
been
good,
getting progressively better as well. Obviously, right tackle will always and forever be an issue this year, and that is never going to change. I shiver at the thought of Isaiah Prince, Mr. 2.4 PFF grade in the Super Bowl, getting a chance this week, but
this
outside
might be
of
controversial, JT, but I think they should stick with Watson and Ojukwu. I think that's the best.
So.
Those two is the best combination they've had at right tackle all season.
Yeah, I agree with you there. But you also talk about how, you talk about a timing based offense in a better protection for the offense here. It's very intricate the way that this offense does. And so Ed, I think, also brings up a good question. Would you also say that because it's difficult for the defense to dissect, it's also pretty difficult for a
Yeah.
quarterback and a quarterback like Will Levis to master this scheme. I think.
What are you
it's fair
saying,
to say.
JT? Will Levis is dumb? Is that what you're saying? A quarterback like
I'm not
Will
saying
Levis?
I'm not saying he's dumb. I'm just saying that he's never played in this intricate of an offense before.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I'm just busting your chops a little bit. I absolutely think that's the case, Ed. I mean, this is pretty different from what Will Levis was trying to learn under Tim Kelly. I think Tim Kelly did a fantastic job of masking some of Levis's issues and kind of leaning into the one read throw bombs that I think a lot of defenses probably weren't ready for in the couple of games that he looked really good last year that tend to stick in our mind as reasons we think he was better last year than this year. Sorry, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but I'll just say yes, Ed. Yes, I do think it's a little more difficult for the quarterback to master a system like this.
Yeah.
Not just because of the reads, but like I said, because of the timing. You think about like the timing of that play to the tight ends I was saying, like you can follow Vanette, but you kind of have to wait on the read until Wiley enters the picture. And so it's not like an automatic thing. Like you can't even make the read until your guys are in the right position.
Yeah, I definitely hear Hingle McCringleberry saying, I think this is supposed to be read in the tense of like Papa John's, better formations, better protection, Titans. I think that's how it's supposed to be said.
I like it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with everything you said. And I think that is the perfect way to talk about how, and end off this discussion about the Titans and more so what they're going up against in the New England Patriots, that I think if you continue to see this scheme progress, now it's going to be tough because it seems like everybody and their mother is going to be out for this game. And so how much can you really execute of your actual scheme if you're missing all the big pieces? I think that's tough, but I do think I like where this offense is going for sure. All right, Stoney, that's going to do it for our Titans talk as we move on to our one of my still favorite segments on this show, even though I'm awful at it.
I sucked last week. I don't think I even got one right at all.
I think you went 1-4 last week.
1-4?
I think you went 1-4. I finally had a winning week. I went 3-2. That is progress. Just like Will Levis's baby steps of progress from making boneheaded plays to not playing, I guess, because he's injured. I too am making progress here now, going 3-2 last week in our best bets. And so, without further ado, let's jump into the Week 9 best bets. My first pick this week is one that I locked in, funny enough, on the Paul Kaharski podcast yesterday, which, by the way, you should go listen to another podcast here on the 440 Network. Got to support our fellow brethren here on the network. I'm taking Green Bay plus 3.5. Now, this has gone down to 2.5. If you can get it at a flat 3 or higher, regardless of the quarterback, I would take it. But funny enough, this is the first game all year that Jared Goff is going to be playing outdoors, or
that's crazy.
Going into Lambeau this week outdoors. And we know that Jared Goff is a totally different quarterback outdoors than he is indoors. When you talk about him playing inside a dome or a dome stadium, he is 41-18 against the spread, 31-10 against the spread the last 4 seasons of his career. And then when you go outdoor, he's only 36-35-2 against the spread. I think this is the top of the market here for a Detroit Lions team, which, as we talk about on this show, that game should have been a lot closer than it actually was last week. And you have a Green Bay team that I think, regardless of who they roll out there, Matt LaFleur is going to have his guys ready in almost a pivotal must-win game for both of these teams. And I think, whether it is Jordan Love or whether it's Malik Willis playing some of his best ball because of the scheme he's in, I do think that you got to back the home under Green Bay Packers. And so with that, I will be taking them, riding with them to pull off the upset and get a statement win against the Detroit Lions.
I'm going to stick with that game for my first pick, and I'm going to take the over. That point total is set at 47.5. I like these two offenses right now. I think the defenses have shown that they can be scored upon a little bit here. I think this is going to be a pretty fun game. I think there's going to be a lot of scoring in this one. I'm looking at this as a 31-28 type of ball game either way. So I'm taking the over.
these NFC North games have really started to be shootout fests in the past couple
Yeah.
of years, I think for sure. And so with my next pick here, I'm going to take the Dallas Cowboys +3 against the Atlanta Falcons. And look, they're coming off a statement game here against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but the Falcons have really not been great in this spot. Just 4-11 against the spread in their last 15 games after a straight up win. I think this comes down to that it's kind of desperation time for a Dallas Cowboys team that needs to get their season back on track. And I think they have a good matchup this week against a Falcons defense that has gotten better, but still just has not been able to get pressure on the quarterback. You look through 8 games, Matthew Judon and Grady Jarrett both only have a sack and a half each. And I mean, you look at Atlanta and what they've been able to do over the last, 8 years. They haven't had a player with over 10 or more sacks since 2016 when Vic Beasley, Titans legend, had his Cinderella insane season. And so with that being said, I do think that even if Micah Parsons isn't out there, I think you get some of those guys back. You're able to get pressure on Kirk Cousins. You're getting Deron Bland back. That secondary is a lot better than people think it is. And so I think Dak is going to have a lot of time in the pocket and is able to, at least go out there and compete with this team, and taking them as the 3 here. I think this is a close game. I think this is a field goal game. And so I'm going to take Dallas to get back on track and go into Atlanta at +3.
I have to have a sicko bet in every column that we do, well, I guess this isn't a column, it's a podcast segment, but in every segment that we do, I've got to have a sicko bet. And I tend to rotate between this year's sicko teams, the Denver Broncos, the Pittsburgh Steelers. And this week I'm going to go with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers +9.5 on the road at Kansas City. I know Kansas City's undefeated, but man, 9.5 is an awfully, awfully big spread for a Tampa Bay team that has played some pretty good football this season. I think this is a tough, scrappy team that doesn't go away. And I don't think that the Kansas City Chiefs are going to go in there and just blow this team out of the water. They have some issues of their own. They haven't quite looked as dynamic as we've expected the Chiefs to look. I think this is a spot where Tampa Bay keeps this one close for a little bit. Kansas City pulls away, and then we might get a little Baker magic, some backdoor cover action from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers here.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, it's almost a system play over Patrick Mahomes as a favorite of more than a field goal. You have to bet him there. All right, with my next pick here, I'm riding with the Jameis Winston Cleveland Browns here +1.5 at home against the Los Angeles Chargers. I mean, as an underdog, Winston is 27-23-3 against the spread, including 5-1-1 against the spread in his last 7 starts in that spot. This has been a rejuvenation here since, Kevin Stefanski has given play calling duties away. Jameis has brought competent quarterback play. Who knew that you just needed competent quarterback play for this offense to come alive? Cedric Tillman, a guy that I was really high on coming out in the draft, actually good player. You come to find out that they draft good players because they're actually good and not just because your quarterback is terrible. But also this defense, the Cleveland defense, is still a legit force to be reckoned with. And you have a Chargers team that, really doesn't have a lot of pass attack options. Ladd McConkey has looked really good, but outside of that, it's been fluky for sure. And so this is a tough team to run on, and that's what the Chargers are predicated on. I don't think they're going to be able to do it very well. I'm looking for Cleveland to get the win at home as home dogs +1.5 this week.
Yeah, I'm back in Cleveland as well. And as a quick aside to everybody that says, well, it's not just the quarterback about the Titans, because I've been saying like they need a quarterback, they need a right tackle, and they need some edge rushers. Look at the Cleveland Browns as to the impact the quarterback can have, and to go from abysmal liability level quarterback play to just competent, decent, stable floor quarterback play. Look at the results. And that's all I'll say about that. I'm going to go with the scrappy Colts here, 5.5-point underdogs at Minnesota. I think some of the cracks in the armor are starting to show for this Minnesota Vikings team. The Colts going with Joe Flacco. I do think Joe Flacco gives this team the better chance to win games. Precision passing is something that Colts offense needs, that they were lacking with Anthony Richardson. I think you usually see a spark when you go with a coaching change or a quarterback change. And I'm gonna back the Colts in this spot, 5.5-point underdogs. I don't know that they win this one, but I think they can keep it within a field goal.
Yeah, I like that one here. As Hingle McCringleberry says, Winston got his eyes fixed, so he's a viable option now.
He's set,
I mean,
man.
at least better than Deshaun Watson. With my next pick here, I'm taking Washington -4 going into New York against the Giants. I know this is a divisional matchup here, but listen, this is just a simple bet of, I mean, Washington is riding high right now. They have the better defense, the better offense on paper. You have the offensive rookie of the year. You looking at the rookie of the year, most likely in Jaden Daniels. They have just been playing so well. And you look at this New York Giants team that has struggled to stop mobile quarterbacks already this season. I really like the Commanders in this spot to really make a statement win as they continue to try to win this division. Daniel Jones, just simply is not it right now for this team. And I think they're really struggling. You have some bright spots like Malik Neighbors and Tyrone Tracy, but really nothing else to show of it. This is another lost season, I think, for the Giants. And so I think Washington stands to go into the Meadowlands this week and really make a statement. So I'm going to take Washington -4.
Tell you what, JT, if you were a subscriber to Stacking the Inbox, you would have known about Tyrone Tracy back in April because he was on my hidden gems list back when we did the draft guide. I like that pick, though. I'm with you on that. I'll keep this next one simple for the sake of time because we are way over. Bills -5.5 hosting the Miami Dolphins. The Dolphins stink, and I think the Bills are a Super Bowl contender.
Yeah, I no doubt about that one either. That's another pick I probably will be riding with you. -5.5 at home. Got to do it. They've always continued to be really, really good against Tua and the Dolphins. All right, with my last pick here in the best bets this week, I'm just going to take the Bengals at home -7. Man, I mean that is a tough loss last week, and as Kenneth I think said earlier here, he said, my bets are a dead horse because I keep betting on Saquon and losing. I need to stop beating the dead horse that is backing anyone against Saquon. But this week, look, Antonio Pierce straight out said that this is a Raiders team with offensive identity whatsoever on their team. And this is a very pissed off Cleveland or Cincinnati team that really needs this win. I think they make a statement this week. I think, you look at the team like the Raiders, in 3 of their 8 games so far this year, they have really been blown out so far and are one of the only teams in the last 20 years to kind of let the game get out of hand, going down by 17 or more points in 3 of those games of 8 games so far this year. This is a game where I think even without T. Higgins, this Bengals team has to get a little bit of a spark and come to life. And so I'm going to back Cincinnati at -7.
For my last pick, I'm going to go with the Tennessee Titans.
Oh boy. Hey, maybe you'll get better luck than me. Every time I bet the Titans on this show, I lose, and I can't do it.
They are 3.5-point favorites at home against the New England Patriots. JT, listen, I don't want to spin too much. I don't want to rile everybody up. People have been mad at me all week anyway for selling positivity because I think the scheme's good and all that.
How dare you?
But I think that the perception of this Titans team is skewed greatly by the outcomes of the last 2 games against teams that have aspirations to be playing in February. I don't think this team is built to hang with those. But that doesn't mean that this team has been playing 100% bad football all season long. I think it's the type of team that will have 3 good downs and then 1 catastrophic down. But I think there's plenty of good football to glean from the losing efforts. And I think when you look at this locker room, I don't get the sense that they're turning on Brian Callahan. I don't get the sense that they're not playing hard, that they're divided. I still think this is a unified bunch that is capable of beating a team like the New England Patriots and beating them soundly. If they execute, which has been a huge question mark, this shouldn't just be a comfortable win for the Titans. This should be a bloodletting. They should bowl the New England Patriots over because they are stifled on offense. They have no weapons. Their offensive line sucks. It's not getting better. Gerard Mayo's in press conferences calling the team soft, and if you watch this defensive front, I absolutely see why. They're kind of slow to fill in run gaps. They don't flow well. The back end is great. The secondary is good, and they can run the ball, and that's about all that's nice that I can say about the New England Patriots. The Titans should handle business on their home field, surviving this gauntlet of super contenders, as our buddy Easton Freeze called them. Surviving this gauntlet, they should be out for blood on Sunday, and they should be able to get this win comfortably.
And that's going to do it for our best bets. To recap, I am taking the Packers plus 3.5, anything at 3 or above there this week. Dallas plus 3, Cleveland plus 1.5, Washington -4, and Cincinnati -7. That's 2 favorites and 3 underdogs. Stoney, you are taking the over in the Green Bay Detroit game. Buccaneers plus 9.5, Titans -3.5, Colts plus 5.5, and then your final pick, Bills -5.5. And that's going to do it for the Hot Read podcast here. Only going 15 minutes over on a Hot Read happy hour. Sinkers Beverages, Bluegrass Beverages. Make sure to check them out at Sinkers Bev, sinkers.nashville on all social medias. Also on Uber Eats, simply search Sinkers because they drive so you can drink responsibly. Stoney, we're going to watch this game this weekend, and whatever happens, happens, and we'll be here to talk about it on Tuesday. As gross as it gets, I'm sure it is, but it should be a good one nonetheless. For Stoney Keeley, this has been the Hot Read podcast. We will talk to you on Tuesday.